News First, Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali.
And a very good evening to you and a warm welcome to Newsline Live. As usual, Newsline Live tries and keeps to the main stories of the day. Notwithstanding the events in the Ukraine and President Putin's flexing of his muscle, Sri Lanka continues to be troubled by various matters. One such matter that is troubling and that has the potential for very long-term implications, especially against the growth of our economy, is that the corporate Sri Lanka are up in arms about the proposed surcharge tax bill, which is now before Parliament. We are told and we learned that the SJB, the party led by Mr. Sajid Premadasa, have challenged some aspects of the proposed surcharge tax bill. And we also understand that there are some corporates who too are going before the Supreme Court seeking what they call a special determination, which under Article 121 of our Constitution is available to citizens of Sri Lanka and corporate bodies too. Now, to discuss this matter, who better than somebody who knows a thing or two about the law and who gives and has given his take several times on our network, and we're delighted to welcome here Counsel of the Supreme Court, Mr. Chrishmal Warnasuriya. Very good evening to you, Chrishmal.
Good evening, Faraz. Good to be here.
Long time no see, I was going to say.
Been a while.
It's been a while. Now then, Chrishmal, the surcharge tax. I have had several sort of messages over the last couple of weeks, and I put this into one. And that they say that this matter must be tested against the Constitution of Sri Lanka. The case, in essence, is between the rich versus the not so rich. There is then an unintelligible act of discriminatory action suffered by a particular group. How would you react to that? As a counsel of the Supreme Court, and we've called upon you several times to interpret the Constitution for us on TV, instead of going to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, we must say that the matter, Faraz, thank you, the matter of interpretation of the Supreme Court is, the Constitution, is the sole prerogative of the Supreme Court. So we will in no manner try to even attempt to arrogate to ourselves that power. However, as counsel that regularly practice there, we have been before their lordships several times when bills are presented, testing it on the scales of constitutionality. That's what you were speaking of. When a bill becomes before a bill becomes law, there is that window of 7 days for an aggrieved person or persons or anyone in even the public interest to go and challenge it on constitutionality. Now, first, for us, as you said, this appears to be aimed at hitting the rich, or someone may call it a Robin Hood law, where you take Att-at-Law in our local. Now, whether it is so is a matter of, number one, I must say, policy. You see, if the policy of a government is to take from the rich and give to the poor, then that policy is not going to be traversed by the Supreme Court. We must be very careful. In fact, even in the recent determination of the lordships in the Goods and Services Tax bill, in the determination, the lordships have very clearly demarcated the boundaries of government. You see, government involves three pillars now. So policy is given to the executive. The executive that is presently enforced as the government placed by the people in power is permitted to bring in policy. That policy is made into law by Parliament, the legislative power of the people, second pillar. So Parliament must make it into law. Those two areas judges will not go through. Traditionally, courts have, we in the judicial arm of government have traditionally held the view that that policy and the formulation of it in Parliament is not an area that courts must traverse. That is because we call this a principle of separation of powers. However, when that policy that is to be made law is to be incumbent upon the people being the absolute sovereign. All three powers, the judicial, legislative and executive, are subordinate to the people.
Indeed.
Now the people have an option to go to their judicial power, the Supreme Court, and say, hello, this is unconstitutional. Now that is something that you are discussing that may happen on principles of constitutionality. Now one single principle in this occasion may be equality, whether people are being treated equal.
Indeed.
Now that is the question for us that you were trying to get to, I think, whether this is an attempt to take from or to tax the rich and then leave out the not so rich. So that's a question.
Yes. If I could also say this, that the proposed surcharge tax appears to me, as a layman, to be rather unequal in its application. And I say this because of this. We have, in the calculation of profits, especially when a group is involved, and you have several companies in a group, for the purposes of calculating the surcharge tax to see if the group as a whole has made 2 billion, you aggregate the profits of each of those companies. But very strangely, the bill does not permit the aggregating of the losses incurred within some companies of that group, whereas you take the profits, you minus the losses, and then say the net figure is so much. If the net figure was to be applied, then you know, if the, as you say, government policy is to tax that, then that's fine. But that then leads to my other question, which is, government policy may well be to raise revenue and to tax the rich and the richer and so on, but it must be done equitably, because that's what the Constitution says.
Yeah, now we bring you managed to bring out a lot of interesting questions. For us, the question of equity and equality before the law are sometimes loosely used, but they're somewhat different. What the Supreme Court will determine on constitutionality is whether certain entrenched provisions of the Constitution, such as the sovereignty provision, which by implication includes equality provisions, which we have determined over a while and that have been considered. So that is what the Supreme Court will test. But let me come to the practical question that you raised. Now you say, very interestingly, another group of companies like yours have spoken to me already on this. I don't know whether we'll eventually end up in the Supreme Court, but I'm sure someone will end up in the Supreme Court challenging this on this particular provision. And this is one area that we were discussing as to this group or cluster of companies where the profits are considered as being together for the purpose of the surcharge. Now the inequality, if at all, for us arises in this manner, not exactly in the fact that you collect all the profits of the group, the companies in the group, and then charge the surcharge. But the inequality will arise, if at all, against another company where it's doing the same business on its own, but it's not part of a group. Whereas now that one company in that group, now one company in that larger group may say, well, look, I'm actually making losses, I'm not even making a profit, right? Why should I, just because I'm part of a group of companies, be subject to contributing? I mean, they won't pay the whole surcharge, but there'll be a contribution. So I am actually making losses, I'm not even making a profit. Why should I be subject to this surcharge? Now that's a question that one individual company in that group may make for us. However, we need to once again, because you've invited me not to discuss corporate business, that's not my area, but to discuss law. We must once again carefully keep in mind.
Yes, but I am honestly asking you a perspective from the law.
So that's exactly what. So when you test this on equality, another principle that we have to bear in mind is, will a company, a corporate body, which is not a natural person but a legal person, where in law, you know, we are a natural person like you and me, that the law accepts as natural person. Then there are corporate bodies like statutory corporations, boards that are enacted by Act of Parliament, or companies that are registered under the Companies Act. They are also considered persons legally.
Yes.
But will they have fundamental rights to go to the Supreme Court? Will they have rights to equality in the same manner as a person? Now these are questions of law that we may very well need to traverse if this matter goes before the Supreme Court. Can I just finish that? Because it's important. So the point is, in Sri Lanka, now in India, they have actually advanced a little bit. They have actually held that corporate entities, although they're legal persons, can attract fundamental rights in certain cases. But in Sri Lanka, the last, I mean, I will have to obviously read it a bit more if the company or whoever, we have to go to court with them. However, in Sri Lanka, the last I knew was, if a person in a company or a shareholder or a director were to say that by certain acts, his rights to equality or constitutional rights are being violated, then that was considered by the Supreme Court as a violation of rights. But as to whether a company on its own, a legal person, not a natural person, can go and plead equality before a court is a question that we will have to look at.
Thank you very much for your questions, and I know that we are holding your attention, which is wonderful, of course. Holding companies is an accounting principle. No such principle applies when entities are taxed. For taxation purposes, they consider each entity. So, consolidation of company profits as a whole for tax purposes violates principles of taxation. Chrishmal, I don't know whether you want to comment on this aspect of taxation.
I mean, it's a fact. It's a fact of taxation. But let us not forget, as you said earlier, without delving too much into detail of that particular question, that even as disclosed in the recent Goods and Services Bill, the state, via State Council in court, have proclaimed that almost one half of its revenue is earned through taxation. So taxation is something that we have to live with. We have to accept.
But that's their policy.
That's their policy. And as I said, policy will not be tested by the Supreme Court on constitutionality.
Provided always that policy is...
Provided that it is constitutional when this policy is brought within the framework of the legislature. Constitutionality is what the Supreme Court will look at. So Supreme Court will not go into what the policymakers, the executive, has decided is right or wrong. That the people must decide at the next election or whatever, whether this particular policy of taxation that was employed by this executive government, whether that was good for them. If that was good for them, then they can continue with that regime. If it was not good for them, then they can thereafter change the regime. I mean, that's a matter that courts will not go into that.
Nadine, one of the other points, of course, that is being spoken about and is a cause of concern is that there is no slab system. If there was a slab system in which you start from zero and you work your way above 2 billion. So this proposed surcharge tax proposes to tax 25%, the surcharge, on those companies who've made, and groups who've made 25%, 2,000 million, 2 billion rupees and above. Whereas, and this is where the apparent inequality comes in, the other companies, say companies and or groups who have aggregated a profit of say 1.9 billion, they don't pay this surcharge. The surcharge is only for people, groups, individuals, companies who've made over 2 billion. And that's we've had several questions bordering on that, especially listed companies, because we have a situation where the public, the people, the sovereign are shareholders, and so they will get hammered again. It's about a 3 times whammy.
Now that is what I said was it has to be an affected person, a shareholder.
Yeah.
Now they may very well have this question that they would wish for the Supreme Court to determine on, right? Now for us, we need to, what you're talking of is the creation of a special class of people.
Absolutely.
Right? Now, this once again has to be tested on constitutional principles. You see, the creation of a special class of persons in itself per se is not unconstitutional. We need to remember that.
Yeah.
So for example, if you were saying by taking it a slab of this 2 billion, you are creating a special class for the purpose of taxation. If the executive can justify that policy, that's policy, right? Then that is in itself is not unconstitutional, so long as it doesn't discriminate someone else, right? Now I'll explain that.
Now, can we just go into the break, because they've lined up a break. We can come back. You can go on. Yes, we'll go for a quick break. And Chrishmal Warnasuriya, Counsel of the Supreme Court, will come up with the end of that explanation. We'll see you on the other side, shall we?
Newsfirst, Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali.
And welcome back to Newsline Live. I'm in conversation with Counsel of the Supreme Court, Mr. Chrishmal Warnasuriya. Old Homian, what did I used to say? Jaguar driving, former member of JVP.
All that, I don't think we have
time.
Right,
we don't have time. Yeah. Carry on with your explanation about that.
Correction, 10 seconds. I was never a member of the JVP. I was invited by a party to be part of the nationalist. I have never taken membership of that party. Anyway, it turned out to be a mistake. But anyway, for us, now, as I was saying, a special class of persons. The best example is, if you remember, when the 17th Amendment was promulgated, when we went to argue it in the Supreme Court, that gave immunity to the Constitutional Council, saying that even the Supreme Court, or if I remember, no court could call into question the actions. Now that was seen to be the creation of a special class of people. Now why the court found it to be unconstitutional was that that court said, well, you can't have one set of people just because they sit in a committee to be not amenable to jurisdiction of courts when everyone else is, right? Now that creates a discrimination against someone else. So that is a good example to show that if you create a special class of people that discriminate, remember Article 12(1) violation needs to discriminate someone for them to agitate the matter before a court, right? Now if for example this creation of a taxation class doesn't discriminate anyone, I mean, that's a constitutional test that we'll have to make in court.
I put it to you that these companies who cannot aggregate their losses and who have to aggregate their profits and have to pay the 25% surcharge are being discriminated because the 25% surcharge is not applicable to anybody else but to them.
Yes. So then I come back to two questions. Number one, can we argue that a corporate entity, a company, can be subject to the same laws of discrimination, 12(1) violations, as a natural person before the law? That's one question we'll have to traverse in court. A company, can they say that I am being unequally treated before the law? Can a company say that? That's a question of law that I'm sure a very deep question of law. If this case comes to court, we'll have to grapple with. Number two, as I said before, people in a company, shareholders, a director who may be adversely affected or being discriminated, they have a right. But as to whether a company has a right is a matter of law that we'll have to argue. Number two, for us, because those other companies are not being taxed, and because there is this group of companies whose profits are being put together and being subject to a surcharge, whether that constitutes a discrimination. You see, if the policy is that we will take from, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, please don't get me wrong.
No.
I'm not a policy maker. If the executive feels that there are these super rich, Robin Hood, take from the rich because we need to feed the poor, and if that's a policy, now that policy is not going to be tested by a court.
No, not at all.
Yeah, but as I said, we will have to show, whoever who goes to court will have to show, me being one of these super rich companies, I am being discriminated vis-a-vis others by this surcharge. So that's, I think we've elaborated on that enough. It is a matter until I think ultimately in a few weeks we will have to decide the matter in a court of law, in Supreme Court, before the Lordships.
Now then, this whole business of apparent inequality and where some people are troubled by it, some say, well, look, you know, to be done with it, we're going to pay because that's what you want to do. But the longer term people thinking are doing the right thing. They're thinking about what effects all this will happen. But when we look at all these things, Chrishmal, and to current matters, it looks like that we really are not being governed at all. That there's a growing sense that authoritarianism is actually ruling the roost, so to speak. As also a person, apart from being a legal man who has an interest in politics and current affairs, what do you feel about that?
Yeah,
I think I'm asking you this question from the basis and perspective of you, citizen Sri Lanka.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with you. On that point, I have no debate. For us, if now we celebrated 75 years of independence recently.
74.
74? Yeah. 1948. If after those 74 years, in 2022, we are saying that we haven't had rains in our catchment areas, our reservoirs have gone dry, and therefore we have to cut your electricity. When my daughter, including lots of children, including my daughter, was sitting A-levels. And if we are saying there is the trouble in the Balkans and Eastern Europe, and petrol lines are closed, and therefore petrol prices are high in the world market, and therefore our petrol sheds don't have petrol when you go to pump, then we don't need a government for us. Frankly,
yes.
You see, we from our ancient days of direct democracy, ancient Greece, Athens and Sparta, where everyone went and sat down and started making decisions, we all knew that all of us can't do this job. Therefore, we elect a few fellows to go and do this job for us. We pay them salaries, we give them vehicles, we give them business class travel and all that to go and do this for us. No?
Indeed.
Because all of us can't go and sit there and make policy for us. Now, if after all these years we are saying because of these problems, we can't manage, then surely there is a problem. For us, surely there is a problem. So we can't, I mean, the very basic for us is that we can't, if we haven't planned. Now, leave alone COVID out. COVID is an exceptional situation where this country faced COVID. I mean, across the world, everyone faced COVID, right? But even with COVID, there are several countries in our region, in Asia, that are showing growth, that don't have petrol queues, that don't have children who can't study for the advanced levels, who don't come to a standstill because they can't go to work because the vehicles don't have fuel. You understand? So we can't blame everything on COVID. Yes, no, COVID was an exceptional reason. But for us, I feel that there is a lot of mismanagement. There is a lot of mismanagement, and we need to, as we keep on saying this, when we elect those who are going to make policy for us, we really need to think beyond our mouth, from our hand to mouth mentality, and beyond emotion. You know, some snake arises from somewhere, we run lock, stock and barrel and then vote. Or someone comes and gives a sermon saying so and so is a hero, and we look for one man to solve all our problems. We need to look at teams.
And that man then spectacularly fails, but carry on.
We need to look at I mean, even now, I'm even telling the opposition now. The opposition must now go before the people. If they are thinking of forming a government, they must go before the people and say, look, this is my team. This is the man who's going to handle my law. This is the man who's going to handle my economy. This is the man who's going to handle, in case of a crisis like this is my response. I mean, the ancient Westminster system is not for us to keep on criticizing the government. Westminster system is, you have a shadow. You have a shadow policy. And you tell them, okay, this is their petrol shed queues, there are no petrol, but if we were in government at this time, this is what we will do.
But that's very, there's little on the ground like that. So none of these people are saying that. I haven't heard anybody from the opposition say, look, I've got 10 instant solutions to the foreign exchange deal.
Then for us, then our system of governance is not going to change any better, is it? Within, I don't know whether it will actually change in our lifetime, but at least in our children's lifetime, unless we start thinking like that. You see, democracy, Burke says, no, a nation gets the democratic leaders they deserve. So if we are to have democratic governance, we need to think democratically. My dear people, we need to think democratically, and us, as I always say when I come to meet for us, we sitting in our lounge chairs in our comfort in Colombo at 9 in the night and watching TV, Chrishmal and Faraz on TV, if we don't share this message with the others who make decisions that affect the future of our country, then we have lost the plot. We need to pick those who manage our country, those who govern us with some intelligence, with some rationale, without being driven by emotion, but look at a team, not some magician who's going to wave some wand and give us miraculous solutions, but we have to look at policy, principles, and how we are going to get over the problem. I mean, and that's how governance is done.
Indeed. And I love these questions, you know, long may you, the sovereign, the people, send me questions. The only super rich people are the politicians. Do they pay tax? Is there anything in the rule books to preclude politicians paying taxes?
No, there's nothing to preclude anyone from paying tax. Us lawyers are amongst one of those higher thresholds of no, but this is again something that I have been agitating for a long time. We, all of us, even when I contested the election, we had to give a declaration of assets.
Yeah.
Even my mother's saris in the Almirah, I had to put down. Her jewellery, all that. Right. Which person after the election goes and finds out, hello, how do these politicians, but the corrupt ones, I'm not talking the good ones,
no.
There may be a few good ones.
Indeed.
How do these corrupt ones manage these millions of rupees worth of vehicles, businesses, foreign expenses, children studying at overseas university? How do they fund it? You declared in your assets all this. Where do you get all these other assets now? In America, for us, I don't mean to think that America is some doyen of virtue. However, when we visited America on a fellowship sometime back, they took us, there is a separate department in the State Department where they go after campaign finance, and if they have not declared even 1 cent of what they had after elections, if it's shown to be otherwise, they go after them, they prosecute them. Now in Sri Lanka, who's doing that?
Nobody. The answer is nobody, because you know, for heaven's sake, much of Sri Lanka are rather myopic, if I may say so, because yesterday's murderers, rapists, tax avoiders, and everything else are today's members of parliament, legislators, and so on, which is a very sorry state of affairs indeed. But Chrishmal Warnasuriya, Counsel of the Supreme Court, thank you for coming and helping to demuddle the brain a little bit. And we appreciate your time. And more than anything else, I think I'd like to say that we appreciate the consistency with which you try and uphold the people's rights in this country. Thank you.
Thank you, Faraz.
And that's the way it was on Newsline Live. Take care. Have a great evening ahead of you, and even, why not, a great weekend. Take care, and as always, God bless you.